I am so excited to be here today with Miss Yolande Athaide. She's going to talk about the importance of advocating for yourself as a woman in STEM, and I'm so honored that she's here to speak with me today. So, first question I have for you is why do you think it is especially important for women in STEM to know how to communicate pride in themselves and their achievements?
Oh, this is something I talk about with my friends, my own daughter, so often. We're still here in this situation of having unequal representation of women on many fronts, in STEM, outside of STEM, in high positions. And a lot of it is because of a sort of a systemic bias or situation that has carried forward in little things that we do and say that we don't really realize it. I firmly believe that our non-female counterparts are very eager to help us move forward in this area, but our actions can and our words can cause us to continue in this cycle. For example, if a parent tends to be very protective of their female child over a male child, um, does not want them to participate in a STEM area because they feel like their opportunities there would be limited because of the history of it. It continues. And STEM is in every part of our lives. So, in my opinion, we need to be, helping them realize the importance of STEM, let them make the choices of whether they want to go forward in it. If the capability is there, and the interest and the capability, then we need to encourage them. But I will say that it is not easy to communicate that, to stand up for ourselves in this area.
Absolutely. As somebody who is just sort of foraying into or journeying into a STEM career myself, I've definitely felt that sense of, well, will I be able to make it? Because I think that one of the things that turns females away from STEM a lot is that sense of, oh, will it be too hard? Or will I not be able to survive it? And you bring up a really good point about um, the protection of women versus like men. What would you say is sort of a good first step in breaking that breaking out of that shell of trying to be more assertive and be more confident in yourself?
But first of all, Ainsley, congratulations on,
Thank
on
you.
moving forward into college and the STEM major. And thanks for doing this series to promote women in STEM. So, there's certain things it can differ. For what works for a person can differ from person to person. But some of the things that have worked for me is having a little bit of I have friends who are female friends who are very strong role models for me. There's one particular lady that I seem to go back to. She's been in what's considered a man's world for years. She's a very successful businesswoman. And anytime I have concerns about, am I just seeing this in the wrong light? Am I overreading what's going on in this situation, where I feel like my efforts are being not recognized? I'll get her guidance. If I want to speak up for myself, I still go and speak with her before to make sure that I get my thoughts in order so that I focus on what's important when I go speak up with my team members, my supervisor, and mostly I find that what I've realized is that there's just a lack of awareness that a particular word or action could cause that, I guess, what we call microaggressions, little things that trigger a response in a woman, or come across as a put down. Other things is to know what resources are available to you, what identity groups, support groups are there to connect with, what HR support is available to me. Being able to talk with someone more experienced, have a mentor. Ideally, you know, there's one thing they talk about is having sponsors, right, for you,
Mhm.
who can keep reminding you that of your strengths, and speak up for you when the situation, for example, if there's a project that somebody's going to be picked for, but you're not in that room to speak up for yourself, someone needs to speak up for you. That's one thing that I think I have, maybe a few informal ones, but I personally need to get that confidence to ask someone specifically to be my sponsor. I don't know if I addressed your question, the specific question you asked, because I know you talked about the difference between male and females, or other genders for that matter. But
No, that was
let me know.
very inspiring, and I really appreciate you touched on a lot of great things, and I want to go back real quick to something you mentioned about microaggressions and how we sometimes don't notice the way that words um impact us. What what can you give an example of a time that you have really noticed that either a word has or a situation where you felt impacted in some way, or you've seen it where somebody has said something that's made somebody else uh feel unworthy? Can you give like a specific example that you remember?
Okay. So this is actually something that interestingly connected for me, clicked for me very recently through some diversity training that I decided to participate in. I had heard the term many years ago from a family member with a very diverse background, and I didn't quite understand it at the time. But for example, you know, there was a situation where I feel like, you know, I have a math background. My undergrad was in math. I was not able to continue in grad school for math, but you know, I'm proud of that fact. And I had somebody say to me recently, "Well, you're a math major, right? Um, let's see if you can do this division problem." I'm a woman who has been in the workforce for years. And I kind of took that lightly. I did not at first pay attention to that question. We continued the conversation. We were discussing a business problem. 5 minutes later, the question was raised again. "You still haven't told me the answer to the division problem." And I had to point out that we don't go to math undergrad to get really efficient in division problems. Not that I couldn't do the division, but so could an elementary school student. You didn't need to ask a woman who's been in the business world for more than 20 years to do a division problem for you. We can even have our little phone devices can do that, you know? So it's little things like that, which when my daughter was in elementary school, I observed her going through that. The boys in her class would comment on that. "Oh, you're good at spelling. Let's see if you can do the math problems
Mhm.
in our class," you know? So I dismissed that as, oh, you know, that's just elementary school boys. And I was surprised to see
Mhm.
it in the work world.
That is interesting. And if I'm reading the situation correctly, it sounds sort of like something that I feel like a lot of women experience, which is this constant need to uh, what's the word, to assert yourself and to prove that you are worthy of being where you are, having to have your abilities tested as though you need to sort of prove yourself rather than just be accepted as the exceptional person that you are. Is that sort of what it felt like?
It did, because, you know, this, that history of who I am, what my background was, is something that had gone through the entire hiring process. Checks had been done. But it feels like when it comes up again and again, there's no need to bring up my undergrad. I'm in the position right now. So yes, I do feel like we have to keep proving ourselves over and over in the same old things that we proved years ago, so you're right
Exactly.
about that.
And that actually is a good tie into talking about advocating for yourself, but because due to the situation where we are constantly being made to prove ourselves, we have to know how to exactly do that. What what strategies for advocating for yourself have you found to be most effective and or self-gratifying?
So like I said, I think the biggest thing for me is, okay, I will say that these things really depend on where you are as in your identity, right? For example, a more privileged woman, and when I say the word privileged, I mean a white person in America, in the US, would have less of a problem maybe self-advocating than somebody who came from another race or ethnicity. How we're brought up can affect our confidence level, that sort of, those are the things I mean. But so I found that I just really need to speak up,
Mhm.
but it's not always easy when you're new in a job, for example. When
Definitely.
you're the most diverse person on a team, it's hard. When you're not sure that your job is done, you're in that job. When there's a possibility of, for example, being let go, it's not easy to speak up. Um, so that's when I feel like, no, feeling comfortable to talk with at least people from your own identity. If we're talking about a woman um, identity group, for example, talking with other women in the same on your team or in the same position, um, helps you realize that maybe the interaction that's not going as well, or the um, where you're not feeling recognized, is or is not, you realize whether it is or is not something you yourself are doing to cause the situation. And
Right.
then so having a sort of a coach or a guide, a friend, someone who truly knows you, that can um, help you with planning how you speak about those situations, has been helpful to me. Reaching out to HR. Now, I would say the one important thing is to remember there is our own personal biases, right? And
Mhm.
our own personal way of bringing something. So we have to be aware of our um, own faults in a way that may cause something. Be open um, to wanting to change that, and but recognizing that it's not all necessarily all your fault, and because um, this all then leads to, you become sort of the inspiration for younger generations of women to follow, right? And have the courage to go into fields that have traditionally been designated not for women.
Exactly. I completely agree with your point about having people around you to bounce ideas off of and to talk to. I think especially for women that's really important because if you're entering a field where there may not be as many women that you can easily see as being successful, it's important to be able to have a network of people you can who can understand where you're coming from because as women we have very different uh, situation, especially if you're trying to enter a male-dominated field. Um, so I really like your point about finding people who you can talk to because I think what you mentioned before about being open to change, being open to being imperfect. I'm sure you have felt there's this pressure to be stellar and perfect, and not make mistakes as a woman. Um, have you ever struggled with that personally?
Well, we do tend to be, a lot of us women do tend to be perfectionists. I'm not saying men are not, or people of other genders. I want to keep it open. I mean, we are talking mainly of women, but many of the thoughts that I express are not just about male versus female. They are not just about, women. It applies to other areas where bias tends to happen. So,
Exactly.
Yeah, we do tend to be perfectionists, but that's one big thing. I've actually been talking with my daughter a lot about that right now. And you see it you'll hear it when you start applying to jobs. People always tell you men don't worry so much about not having 5 items out of the 7 that are requirements for the
Right.
application.
I've heard that.
But women go, oh my gosh, I don't have one of them, I shouldn't apply. We need to stop thinking that way. We need to go for it and know that that little one thing is going to be the challenge that'll help us grow in that job. I have been talking with my daughter a lot about this because she's in a research program right now, and she's experiencing some of that, feeling like she comes in with the least experience, background knowledge of the subject. And we don't have to be the one who has all the answers every day in our jobs. It's okay to contribute once, periodically, as long as we're not completely not participating or not putting our best forward. It's the putting our best forward that matters.
Absolutely. I really like that. I like what you're saying about embracing those challenges, because I feel like, any job is worthwhile if it allows you to grow, both professionally and as a person. Um, and I think that's a really good point to make about not feeling like you have to come in knowing everything, because there's no way anybody can possibly know everything, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that goes back to what we're talking about, advocating for yourself. You need to know how to advocate that maybe you don't have the most experience, but you bring a unique perspective to the table that only you can bring. And that's really
Correct.
what you can contribute to the team. And so knowing how to convey that can be difficult, I bet.
Yes, it can, but I can see that you're going to be very successful in the field, whichever field you pursue, Ainsley. You've got some great um, insights into the troubles, experiences of women, but you're doing so much at such a young age. It's pretty incredible.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I just think it's so important that women have their voices heard. The things that you've been sharing today, these are the experiences that maybe a lot of other women are having too, but just nobody has ever talked about it before. And that's what we need. We need to talk about these things and let people know this is the real story. I wanted to definitely ask this one question about, um, can you share about a time when you have needed to be your own advocate? And do you think that it would have been a different experience if you had been another gender, specifically a male gender?
Um, there are many instances I can think of. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's difficult to pick one without being concerned of how should this be heard across, by people in that particular situation, how it would be carried out. So I'm going to tell you one that's more, it involves just me and my husband, who have been business partners for many years before I joined my new job. And a recent, we were filing our tax returns, and one of the things that we do is there are some years we've not really made any tax contributions retirement contributions for ourselves. It all depended on, we kept our business pretty small so that we could have time to spend with our children as they were growing up. And so some years, when family expenses took priority. There were no retirement savings put aside. And so we wait until the tax return is prepared to get advice from our tax preparer on how much to put aside. And the gentleman who did that created an allocation that made my husband's something like 3 times mine, or something like that. And I thought at first, well, what difference does it make, right? Because this is a family retirement thing. Eventually, if you know, we'll use it together no matter what. But then retirement savings tend to be some sort of proof of what a woman has done in her life, in her work life, right? And that's been the thing that in some ways has halted my ability to get in, you know, and interfered with my ability to get into certain positions that I'm looking for, because it looks like, oh, my income doesn't match, my retirement contributions don't match what I'm saying I did. So I spoke up to the tax preparer and I said, you know, I don't just do the analytics side of things. I manage the entire business, the financials, the legals, the operations side of things. So I feel like there should be a more even distribution. My husband and I have always done a 50-50 distribution when we have put aside in savings. And he came back with, oh, well, you know, the way we allocated this company is in your husband's name, which is completely not true, but, you know, that's how he was preparing the tax return. And I said to my husband, I feel like you should weigh in on this and let him know if you agree that we need a more even distribution. Meanwhile, the tax preparer came back with, well, if you want to do this, we'll just switch your husband's and your name. And my husband said, yes, let's put Yolande as the main owner on the company. So that's how the allocation was done. Again, it's not one way or another overall as a family, it doesn't really matter, but it's one of the ones that I feel a little more secure speaking up about at this point in my career.
Definitely. That is really fascinating. And the fact that you were able to speak up about that is really inspiring. But I think, you know, that just goes to show the kind of situations don't just happen, you know, in the workplace. They can happen anywhere. You know, you could be subject to a microaggression at the grocery store just because our culture uh is so geared toward putting men in that superior position, that you can have a situation like that where maybe it was intentional. That's just how it ended up happening. That's
Exactly.
that's really interesting. And you know, I really like what you've been saying throughout this time about speaking up, because I feel like that's something that women struggle with a lot, because there's that fear of like the backlash, or uh you know, will you be seen as difficult or not cooperating if you speak up about something that isn't right. What are some of your tips to maybe women who are just sort of starting their careers or even starting college on building that confidence and speaking up?
You're right, Ainsley. Unfortunately, women who speak up are labeled. And, you know, I've observed as a parent raising a son and a daughter, a son's words are thought of as, oh my goodness, that is such a brilliant comment. My daughter can say the same words and be told, oh, you're just a cat, you know, fighting for
Mhm.
little things. So it's
Interesting.
interesting, but it happens. And I am not one who keeps quiet, unfortunately. So I get into trouble. Get into trouble, if you want to call it that. For me, it's more about if I let it go, somewhere down the line, some other person, my daughter, I don't want her to have the same situation, you know, and when she's in the workplace. So not just her, though, other women are going to encounter the same thing. It's just going to go on forever. And so that's why I end up speaking up. And Um, Sometimes you get so the retaliation can add up so much that you tend to go in a corner sometimes and say, that's it, I'll never do it again. But this
Mhm.
is where I recently read it might have been that diversity program I just recently took, that it mentioned that you should get together a group of like-minded people. It's nice to have people from that same identity, whether it's a women's group or any other identity group. It's nice to have someone from outside of that identity group, so a male sponsor or a non-female person who agrees with your point of view. Basically, address the situation as a group rather than an individual where you can. You won't always be able to do that. That's one thing that I would recommend to avoid a personal backlash where possible.
I really like that. That's a really good point. It makes me think of labor unions. One person fighting
Yes,
by themselves would not be nearly as effective, but when you have a group of people, that collective action can sometimes be a lot more impactful.
exactly.
And that goes back to what you were saying before about finding a community because, when you have a group of people who you can support each other, I think, it's definitely takes away that sort of that personal um, feeling of like, oh, I don't want to do this because there's nobody behind me. I will be labeled and seen as difficult. But if you've got, a supportive group around you, then you feel that sense of okay, we can do this together. Thank you so much for your time today. I really, really enjoyed speaking with you, and you've really inspired me to be more confident in myself as well and speak up. So thank you so much, and yeah,
Thank you, Ainsley. Thanks for having me on here, and good luck with college.